Involvement. Welcome everybody to this ProLEER event, the panel on parental involvement. We have two speakers today, one from the Netherlands, Professor Eddie Denissen, and one from Mexico, Elisa Bonilla. And we're very excited to have them because they will present different perspectives on parental involvement. Eddie Denissen will talk about the research and pose some questions, and Elisa will present a very specific example of parental involvement that's very interesting from Mexico. This will be the last ProLEER panel event of the year, so I already invite you to sign up to make sure that you check your mailbox for any news about ProLEER for next year, because we're bound to have another round of very interesting talks and panel session next year. Let me first of all introduce myself, because some of you may not know me. My name is Kees Broekhoff. I work for Sardis Foundation in the Netherlands as a linguist, and I've been part of the ProLEER network for more than 10 years and hugely enjoy the meetings that we have, whether they be online or live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's always fun to be together and to share our interest in the development of children. I'm very happy to tell you that we have two great panelists today, and I would like to introduce the first because he will start this meeting today with his presentation. And this is Eddie Denissen, Professor Eddie Denissen. He is a Sardis Professor of Sociocultural Diversity and Differentiation in Education at Leiden University, and he is Associate Professor of Educational Sciences at the Behavioral Science Institute at the Radboud University, Nijmegen, the Netherlands. So Judith, you must know Eddie very well, because you're from the same area. I'm sure
Yes.
You've worked together in the past.
We work together very.
Yeah, I know that. Okay, Eddie, let me tell you, Eddie got his PhD in 1999 on sociocultural differences in attitudes towards education in the Netherlands. He focused on the relations between, on the one hand, social class backgrounds, religious and political values, and on the other hand, perceptions of good education. These relationships, Eddie found, can help to understand processes of choice, selection, segregation, inclusion, and exclusion in schools. After his PhD, he developed his expertise in various related domains, such as educational inequality, teacher expectations, differentiation in schools and classrooms, school choice, cultural ethnic segregation, and of course, parental involvement in education. On these topics, Eddie has published a wide range of empirical research papers and book chapters. Professor Denissen is chair of the European Network about Parents in Education, and he is also chair of the editorial board of the International Journal about Parents in Education. In his presentation, Eddie will share his research and expertise in the area of parental involvement in education. He will introduce the theoretical underpinnings of parental involvement in education, and he will present the current state of research in this field. He will also pose some critical questions and comments related to parental involvement as a normative and contested concept. Eddie, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Kees, for this nice introduction. Let me first try to share my screen.
Maybe while you do that, Eddie, I invite everyone who is present right now to share their questions via the chat. But after Eddie's presentation, there will also be an opportunity for questions.
Okay, can you see my first slide? Yeah.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. So welcome. I'm here in the Netherlands, so it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon here on a Friday afternoon. So this is my last thing to do before the weekend, but it's nice to do it. I will share with you some general ideas about parental involvement. I don't know your particular background in this field, so I will share maybe some basic notions that you are aware of, or some new things. So just an overview of the field of theory and research on parental involvement. But let me first introduce myself a little bit more. These are some headings of the papers that I published the past years on the topic on parental involvement, school-family relationships. And it ranges from the involvement of parents in early literacy, as you might be interested in particularly, but also general ideas on cultural differences in education, relationships between parents and schools in a more general sense, teacher education, and how schools can promote involvement of parents. So I'm very much interested in many aspects of this field. And this is why I have different perspectives. I'm not only focusing on one group of children or one particular problem related to parental involvement. And as Kees has said, I'm a chair of the European Research Network about parents in education. We have our website, ERNAPE. We just had our conference in the Netherlands. And we alternated with our sister organization in the US, in Baltimore, the International Network of Scholars, INET, related to the Center on School, Family and Community Partnerships at Johns Hopkins University. So we have strong links with the community of Joyce Epstein that who you might know. So what I'm going to do today is to give you some scientific background on parental involvement, some overview of research findings, a reflective moment, and of course some implications for practice, and mostly practice related to professionals who try to involve parents in the education of their children. So if we talk about scientific background, then there is one famous name in this field, and I already mentioned her, Joyce Epstein. We consider her the queen of parental involvement. She's the most famous person in this field, and she developed her theory of overlapping spheres of influence, in which she discerns school, family, and community as important, influential socializing spheres for children. And according to this idea, the overlap between those spheres is most important for children to develop. So strong school, family, community connections help children to learn and develop and grow. And therefore, especially the family-school relationships are important, in which parents and teachers can work together. She has developed her work in the context of the work of James Coleman. She actually did her PhD with James Coleman, who is famous for his work on social capital. Related to social capital, we also need to take into account notions by Pierre Bourdieu regarding cultural capital. So cultural and social capital are concepts that can be really helpful for understanding our school-family relationships. Just a short note on that one. So if we talk about cultural capital, we talk about all kinds of cultural customs, practice, values in families and schools. So you find in every family basic values, knowledge about learning, preference regarding to the consumption of news, TV, habits for communicating at home, language use. So all kinds of intellectual characteristics of a family are related to the cultural capital in the family. And as Pierre Bourdieu has elaborated, we have some kind of a hierarchy of practice that higher social classes, they have tastes and knowledge and customs that are more valued by our teachers and education. And for higher social classes, the bridge between the cultural capital in school and at home is most easily to bridge. For lower SES families or language minorities, these bridges might be a little bit more difficult to bridge. So cultural capital can help understand the differences between families, but also the gaps between the culture at home and the culture at school. Social capital is related to the relationship. So social capital takes its form in relations and networks between teachers and families, but also families among families, so parents who know other parents, but also networks with other professionals around the school. So two basic notions are related to social capital. So the support that can be brought in the social network. So if you have a social relationship, you can support each other through this social network, and relations give the opportunity to monitor each other. In particular, parents can monitor the children, and if parents and teachers work together, they can share the monitoring of children's progress, which helps children to develop. So cultural social capital are important basic concepts for this notion of parental involvement. And Joyce Epstein takes this notion of networks and community involvement and overlapping spheres of influence into 6 types of parental involvement. So she developed a framework based on this theory of 6 types of involvement. You might know it, but I just go through them quite quickly. So first of all, it's important that children can benefit from good parenting. And parenting, Joyce Epstein means just basic, the support of basic needs, like good sleep, care, food, but also discipline at home, just the basic obligations that parents have for preparing their children for a good education. So going to bed on time, having breakfast in the morning, etc. Second, parents and teachers communicate. So communicating is the second type of involvement. Communicating means talking with each other, parents and teachers, but also reading newsletters and knowing about each other's context. The third type of parent involvement is volunteering. So parents can volunteer at school, just helping with the tasks that need to be done at school. And type 4 is learning at home, where parents can support their children at home with school in various ways. I will talk about it in a little bit later, a little bit more. The fifth type is decision making. So some parents are active in decision making at school, being part of the school board, being consulted in school policy issues, thinking in think tanks for school improvement plans, etc. And the sixth type is collaboration with the community. And there are all kinds of supportive organizations come into play, like youth care, library, all kind of welfare organizations that might be related to the network of schools and families. So if we break it down, I usually communicate also with the teachers and the schools that I work with in 3 large domains of parental involvement practices. So what can parents do at home? And that relates to the types of parenting and learning at home. So talking about school, reading, helping with homework, controlling, monitoring the children, and providing some social emotional support. So control sounds a little bit negative. So you control your child, but it's more that you know what your child is learning, and you have some idea about what is expected from the child, and you can monitor and support your child with it. The second group of parental involvement practices is school involvement. So all things that parents can do at school. So helping at school, in the classroom or outside, and participating in a more formal way in formal decision-making processes in schools. And the third group of activities is related to communication, contact between parents and schools, attending parents' meetings, talking with the teacher, reading the school's newsletter, and so forth. So, and there's also, I don't know if it's the case in your context, but we see more and more the use of social media like WhatsApp or Facebook in which schools and parents can communicate. So that are interesting ways in which the schools and family can work together. So having said this, I'm going to guide you through some research. We did some reviewing work and some research that we did with our own group, but I will just take it together to share basic insights in the research on parental involvement that are quite valid across cultures. So in many studies, we consistently find similar outcomes. And these are some basics in research on parental involvement. We see, if we break it down to the different types of involvement, we see a lot of different effects of the types of involvement. So home involvement is most effective regarding all different types of involvement. So if you look at the relationships between parental involvement activities and children's learning, then home involvement is the most effective type of involvement for children's learning. School involvement has very small effects. So school involvement is important, but it's not directly related to children's academic performance. So if it comes to the cognitive benefits of parental involvement, home involvement is much more important than school involvement. And communication can be seen as a condition. So communication helps to strengthen home involvement. So communication does not have any direct effects on children's learning, but communication can help parental involvement at home. And in that way, it helps indirectly by talking about shared responsibility, sharing expectations, having trustful relationships, for teachers being culturally responsive to families. All these types of communicating and getting to know each other help teachers in school, but also help parents at home. We also see, if we delve into the home involvement, we see a very large effect of cultural capital indicators, much more than social capital indicators. So the cultural climate within the family, and usually it's denounced as home literacy environment. So the intellectual climate in the family is mostly important for children's learning. Related to that are parental reading socialization activities in the home. So children learn by observing their parents reading to see how it's enjoyable, how parents are motivated to read by themselves. So that kind of parenting behavior is observed and is sometimes it's a type of model learning that children learn by observing their parents. We also see that elaborate interactions. So if you have a rich language and you have more elaborate styles of talking, children learn more in families with elaborate language. So shortly said, it's mostly important to talk with the child than talking to the child, to elicit interactions and arguments between parents and children. And also joint reading together, interactive storybook reading. It's no surprise for you that these are success indicators of home involvement. But we also see large differences between families. So if we look at the differences between families, then we see huge differences between families regarding parental involvement, which can be related to cultural and language backgrounds. So if you look at cultural factors that impact the involvement of parents, we see that especially in at-risk families, parental involvement is hindered by negative attitudes of parents towards learning. Many parents have a negative history of learning, so they have not a very positive association with schools. and that can negatively affect their involvement in their children's learning. We see interaction styles in low SES families, in particular, that have not the most rich vocabulary and complex styles of language. So in these families, children have lower access to vocabulary and syntactic complexities. Parents might not see it as their role to be a teacher, so their role perceptions are important, and especially in lower SES families, parents, they find it difficult to see what their roles can be in supporting their child. And that also relates to a general lower sense of efficacy. Parents, they don't feel large degrees of competence in helping their children. But also language difficulties might be a problem. So if the home language is not a school language, there are some barriers for parental involvement, and also parents who don't have linguistic competences in the school language, they might not be able to support their children's learning of the school language. So there are some language barriers to overcome as well. So the most difficult task for educators is to bridge the cultures, the context of low SES or other minority families and the school. And that is why we did some research on how can this bridge be built. And a lot of school family books, they have this bridge on the cover because the bridge is a very good metaphor of the different cultures that need to be bridged by smart programs of family and parental involvement. In that sense, this is a very good model and a very well-known model for increasing family school connections. It's a model by Kathleen Hoover-Dempsey and her colleagues. And this is a model that explains differences in parental involvement. It's very complex. I saw that the paper can be accessed through this QR code. I will share the PowerPoint with you, of course. But I just want to focus on this one. So how can schools invite parents to be involved at home? So that's the most important task for schools, to invite parents to be involved. And then you can see that it builds to all steps in this model that indeed it leads to more skills and knowledge and self-efficacy for school success. But this building block is really, really important. So what I want to share with you now is some insights of one of our PhD students from Indonesia, Kartika Yulianti. And she did a particular interesting study on school leadership and parental involvement. And she developed this model and she tested it with quantitative and qualitative studies. So we see that if schools want to promote parental involvement according to this model, teacher invitations for parental involvement, according to Hoover-Dempsey's model, is really important. But for teacher invitations, we also can take a look at the leadership in the school. So how can school leaders help teachers to invite parents to be involved? So it's a whole chain of related activities, from leadership of the school to student achievement via teacher invitations and parental involvement. So if we talk about transformational leadership, we're talking about these types of leadership in the school. And it's taken from the general transformational leadership theory. So a school leader should develop a shared vision, high standards of professionalism and goal consensus. Teachers should be given some individualized support from their leader and intellectual stimulation, but also modeling valued behaviors in relation to the school leader and parents, and building collaborative structures, strengthening school cultures, and engaging parents and the wider community. So these are the transformational leadership activities that might help promoting parental involvement in schools. And So we see this, we developed a survey with this kind of statements. So my school principal supports me in communicating with parents about how they can help their child learn at home. So this is the relation between leadership and teachers' invitation, and the direct effect. My school principal takes the initiative in conducting events for parents in the school. So it's a direct relation between transformational leadership and parental involvement. So the school principal can be a model for promoting parental involvement and can be also supportive for teachers to invite parents to be involved. So teachers' invitations for parental involvement can be distinguished into these two types of involvement, so school and home involvement. Teachers can invite parents for school involvement activities, so invite to volunteer, to participate, but also invitations for home involvement. So mostly via task or homework for students, teachers can invite parents to be involved in their children's learning. But that can also be during parent-teacher meeting or projects that parents and teachers do together. So what we found in this study, we found that transformational leaders indeed have an effect on teacher invitation. So it helps for teachers if the transformational leadership in school is there. And we see positive effects of teacher invitations on school involvement. So it's effective if teachers invite parents to come to school. Indeed, parental school involvement increases. But the effects on learning at home are rather small. So it seems to be difficult for teachers to invite parents for involvement at home in supporting their children. So these effects were not very strong. And we saw indirect effects of transformational leadership on parental involvement. If the school leader helps teachers to invite parents, that helps indeed the parents to become involved. So what we learned from this is that the challenge for teachers is to more effectively invite parents to be involved at home. And that is a challenge for many family literacy programs. How can we effectively invite parents to support their children at home? So I want to give that a little bit thought in this one reflective slide. In which we also I give an overview of some critical literature on this topic. So what we see in family literacy program evaluations and analysis, that the invitational effects of these programs for parental involvement are limited because of some characteristics in programs. So critical theory points at least 3 risks of family literacy programs, why they might not be effective in involving parents. The first is that there is still, and there are differences between programs, but there is still a deficit approach in many programs, focusing on remediation of deficits in the family. So parents, they don't read to their children, they have to read. Parents who do not read well with their children, they have to train how to be the good parent, to read as the ideal parent should. So we have this ideal parent idea in programs that we train parents to be or to become. So, and that might not be effective if parents are not willing or not capable of behaving in that way. So that's one problem in family literacy. The second one is that we might not take the involvement into account that naturally exists in every family. And there are some interesting studies that focus on, for example, the transmission of work ethos or other values that might not be recognized in family literacy programs, because if parents are involved in a typical way, just not in the way that we ask with surveys, then they might be considered as not involved or low involved, but they are involved in their own way. For example, many parents, they don't show up in schools because they have a high level of trust in teachers. And they say, well, it's not my task to control teachers. I trust them, so I don't need to be present at school during meetings. That can be considered as a high level of trust and involvement, but usually it's conceived of in a different way. And in the third place, teachers tend to feel a kind of frustration and anger if parents don't respond to their invitations. And then there is an inclination of teachers to blame parents or to stigmatize parents as not interested or not involved. And that has all kinds of negative effects in the end concerning the relationship between teachers and parents. So these are some critical reflections on family literacy programs. I'm going through it quite fast because I'm running out of time, but I hope you get these ideas. So let me then move to the implications for practice. So if we look at what works, yeah, I really love these insights by Shirley Bryce Heath. So we have two critical factors for success. And this she wrote in 2010, but it's still, I think, a very challenging and interesting task for programs to include these insights. So the first is that we should try to build sustained language interactions between parents and children. So not incidental activities, but try to change routines in the family with programs. Because short-term programs, they don't have this lasting effect. And the second one is that programs should focus on the fact that parents should experience real pleasure in doing and being with children in all stages of development. So it should not be a duty or a burden to read with children or to play with the children. Focus on enjoyment and fun. That should be most important. So it should be a pleasure to do. And then you can motivate parents to be more involved and don't focus on learning, but just focus on enjoyment and having fun things to do together. So this regarding specifically language learning in the young age, and in a more general sense, I developed a poster based on the reviews of research and the insights in the literature for schools and teachers for communicating with parents. You can download it from this website. It's I put it on ResearchGate, and it's also part of the strategy of one of my collaborating partners, Social Schools, who build a lot of social media applications for family school connections. And they take these communication tips into consideration, which I appreciate. So just very quickly, take all parents' concerns seriously. So these are mostly open doors for professionals like us, but it's I think it's an overview that might help discussing this with practitioners. Express mutual expectations as soon as possible, two-way communication, help teachers to stimulate parents' home involvement. So what I talked about, don't try to change parents, but change your way of communicating. Include children as much as possible in parent-school communication. I didn't talk about this, but this is a whole story, but including children in the communication between parents and families actually helps. Communicate positive experiences and not only negative ones, and respect children's need for autonomy. So social network theory also points to the risk of being too controlling or too monitoring. Too much involvement can have negative effects on children's well-being and feelings of autonomy. So we should not overdo parental involvement. So that brings me to the final conclusions, just to wrap it up. It's no surprise that parental involvement is important for school success, that teachers indeed can promote parents' involvement, but home involvement is more difficult than school involvement. We see social cultural differences in parental involvement that we need to take serious. So in parental involvement programs, we should more respect and acknowledge these differences between families. And there are many programs that do, but still we find evaluations of programs that are quite disappointing because of the lack of acknowledgement of cultural backgrounds of families. So this will be also, I think, a very important task for our future to build stronger programs for parental involvement. So just this in a short time. I hope I didn't exceed the time, but thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Eddie, for this amazingly insightful review of what the research says about parental involvement. I think this was, for a big part, very recognizable for many of us. For instance, the frustrations that we find when we try to improve parental involvement, and we don't manage to do so because of all sorts of reasons. And I think you have very clearly pointed out what kind of problems exist in many of these approaches. I was wondering, are there any questions in the chat or any people who want to put up their hands for a question? Let's see, this is Ying, and Ying's question is, does it happen that well-educated parents often have a bigger role in school involvement, which follows that the children receive more attention from school and more likely that the children achieve better school success?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. We did a study in about the teacher perceptions of parental involvement. So if you look at how teachers perceive the involvement of parents, then we see that teachers tend to overestimate the home involvement of high educated parents. So if you have a low education background or you have a low socioeconomic status, teachers tend to rate your involvement at home lower than it actually is. And it happens that perceptions that teachers have self-fulfilling prophecy effects on children. So for children, it's positive if teachers think that your parents are involved. And so this parental involvement perceptions of teachers, they are somewhat biased, and they might lead to self-fulfilling prophecy effects, just like Pygmalion effects in terms of teacher expectations. So yes, well-educated parents, they don't need to have a bigger role in the class to be more effective on their children's learning through the perceptions that teachers have of their involvement.
Okay, so yes, this was a very interesting question, and thank you for answering that. There is another one, Eddie, about and this is, I think, something that concerns many of us. Do you know about tools for teachers to evaluate home involvement and then give differentiated support to families? And I would like to add to that, this differentiation part. There is differentiation, of course, in socioeconomic background, but there's also differentiation in age. Some kinds of parental support might be very effective at a young age, but not as effective at a later age. So maybe you can tell us something about that too. So we're talking about evaluative tools for teachers and differentiation regarding socioeconomic background and age.
Yeah, there are some approaches that help teachers and schools to get to know home context better. So you have the eco-cultural theory, which have also eco-cultural family interview schemes that help teachers to ask the right questions to parents to get to know the home situation. That can that they can take into consideration in their teaching. So the eco-cultural theory might help, but also the funds of knowledge concept. So that teachers try to identify the funds of knowledge in the home that they can relate to in their classroom. And there are also interview schemes that teachers can use to get information about the home environment, and especially to identify the strength in the home.
And do you happen to know of any research in which this this theory was put into research interventions, or?
Yes, the funds of knowledge approach is actually studied by colleagues from Amsterdam, by Monique Volman. I will put the name in the chat, and she took the concept of funds of knowledge from Louis Moll, who did conceptual work, but also research on this funds of knowledge concept. And if it comes to the age, it's interesting because we see that the role of parents changes when children get older. So their need for autonomy increases. And also the need for specifically the need for language learning is different. So with young children, you read more to and with the children. So older children, you need to support, to motivate them to read by themselves. So the parental role in relation to reading activities changes when children get more proficient in reading, but also if they gradually age into more independent and self-regulated learning. So it's not that the parental involvement with young children looks the same as with older children. So, and indeed we see levels of parental involvement decrease in age, but we also see that when children get older, they still need more support from the children than we actually observe. So parents can do more, even in older age groups.
Thanks, thank you, Eddie. One final question before we move on to the next presentation. This one is from Kimberly. Eddie, would you please tell us more about the deficit approach, a focus on the ideal parent, the cultural homogenization? How does it happen? And I think more importantly, how to avoid it?
Yeah, this is a really good question, because it's so easy to fall into the trap of this problem. Because if we look at research on what works in education, we see that specific interactions are very effective for children's learning. So, for example, shared storybook reading and elaborate interactions between parents and children, they are really helpful. So we can train parents to show these behaviors, because we know that that will benefit the children's learning. But then we are trying to build one group of all parents doing the same. So we take the ideal parent, so the parent who has a very interactive style of reading, and we try to train all parents to become this ideal type of parent. So this is what I mean with the cultural homogenization, that we focus on one ideal type of parenting. And this is present in many parental reading socialization programs, in which we implement what we know, what good reading is, and how good reading affects the vocabulary and language development of children. So it's quite easy to take these frames into account when we discuss reading with parents. But if we can avoid it by first listening to parents and talking about how they interact at home. So what do you do? Do you watch TV together? What kind of activities do you do together? And try to link with the existing activities and try to build what we know of research into the practices that parents and children already undertake. And then we can build stronger connections to the practice in families. And then maybe they don't do everything that we know that might work, but we don't force them into this mold of this ideal parent. It's very easily said, I immediately recognize it, but this is a very interesting discussion to further develop, I think.
Yes, and I have found that one of the ways to go around this problem is to use computer technology. If you look at the complexity of reading books to children, one of the ways to do this would be to show storybooks on screen, animated stories where the stories are told by a proficient reader, and parents just sit there with their child, looking at the stories, watching the stories together, and interacting with their child about the stories. This is one of the ways, I think, in which this problem could be solved, and the results seem pretty promising. But again, you have the problem of requiring parents to adhere to models of interaction that may not be familiar, and to have the equipment at home to be able to look at these interactive storybooks. But I agree, it's a very difficult problem, and we're all working to try to solve it. Eddie, thank you so much for your presentation, and I hope you will stay with us until the end of this meeting, and maybe answer some other questions that may come up.
Yeah,
so
I will share my PowerPoint, and if you have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to send me a message. Yes,
okay, we will make sure that your PowerPoint is distributed among all the participants. Thank you. Okay, then let's move on to the next presenter, Elisa Bonilla. Elisa, welcome to our ProLEER meeting. We're very excited to have you here. You were an official of the Mexican Ministry of Education in 2 periods. From 1993 to 1997, you were Director General for Educational Materials, and you coordinated the National Literacy Program, distributing millions of books to schools. And from 2016 to 2018, you were the Director General for Curriculum Development, and you headed the development of the new national curriculum in Mexico for 0 to 3-year-olds and pre-K to 9-year-olds. You were also the CEO and Chief Publishing Officer at the Mexican branch of the Fundación SM, a foundation established by educational publisher SM Santa Maria, aimed at improving the quality of education. And in 2018 and 2019, you were appointed Antonio Madero Visiting Scholar at Harvard's David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies. And that is a place we all know very well, because that is exactly where ProLEER network meetings take place, when we meet live. From 2019 onward, you have been working as an independent consultant in education. And in particular, you have coordinated the academic design of Stronger Babies, Bebés Más Fuertes, an intervention at the state level to give babies from 45 days to 11 months the best possible start in life. Elisa will talk to us about this program, Bebés Más Fuertes, focusing in particular on the way the program helps parents to be supportive for their child. Elisa, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Can you see my presentation already?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, as I said, I'm very, very grateful to be here. I've known about ProLEER for a long time, and to be able to be part of one of your panels, it's great. Thank you. As Case just said, I've started as a researcher a long time ago. I was trained in England to be a researcher, and I worked as doing that for 7 years. But then I was invited to the Ministry of Education in 1993. I thought it was going to be an appointment for 2 years, but I realized I was a much better practitioner than I was a researcher. Not only I enjoyed it more, but I was more effective at it. So most of my life, I've been both in the public and private sectors, more like a policymaker, you could say. So what I'm going to show you today is precisely a program that we call Bebés Más Fuertes, Stronger Babies, which the main goal of this program is to give babies from 40 days old to 11 months old the best possible start in life. This is an initiative of an organization that's called Childhood First. I leave the website there if you're interested in looking at it. They're mostly practitioners like myself, former officials of the Ministry of Education in Mexico, that have this consultancy firm to help authorities, mostly local authorities, develop their own policies. So Childhood First developed an ECE initiative founded on a pedagogical model and a strategy to service low-income families, aiming at babies in their first years of life. You need to know that Mexico developed this curriculum as Kate said. I was there at the ministry when we did that. We had something done before with Catherine Snow, some years before that, and after that, in 2019, it became compulsory early childhood education. What this means is not very well understood yet, because there is not an infrastructure for providing every baby, every child between their birth and the 3 years old with a service. But that means that what it has provoked is that the local authorities have started to move and to organize things to be able to comply with what the law says now. The state of Mexico approached Childhood First, and that was the opportunity to develop this program. It started in 2020, precisely with COVID, just in one municipality in Lerma, which is more or less 1 hour away of the capital, in the state of Mexico, which is a state with the biggest population. But it's very small in surface, in area, and it's around Mexico City. After being there for some time, we're now starting this year in a new state, which is called Puebla. I have to say that this program is a public service. It's not a research project. And what it does offer to local authorities, we wanted to work with 3 main characteristics, which had to be flexible, it had to be scalable, and it had to be inexpensive. Because, I mean, the law is there, but there's very little money coming towards the states to be able to put these services in place. So we developed 4 areas. First, the educational model, which has work methodology, which developed some curriculum specifically for the program. This is directed specific to parents, to working with parents. We help the state design and planning process with the preliminary analysis of where they want to work, the pilot project design, the implementation plan. We develop very good quality materials and a training program, as well as helping the state with the implementation and monitoring process. I have been mostly involved with the educational model and the development of the materials and training, although I've also been close, but not directly involved with the design and planning and the implementation monitoring phases. The target population is precisely adults. These are the parents and the primary caregivers to young children. And we're focusing on babies which are from 40 days old to 11 months. And the program is, or the project is aimed at educating parents to educate their children. 100% of the first people to register, that first attendees, were women, mostly mothers, 95%, and some grandmothers and other women close to the children. We had a study done before we started, what we call the field study in 2019, to understand better who were the moms we were going to be working with. And the first thing we found out, which the numbers would already said it, but it was very clear, is that the moms are very young. And as they grow older, they tend to leave school and they tend to stay at home. They're stuck with domestic chores mostly, with very basic schooling and little opportunities for their own advancement in life. In contrast, men, the parents, are in the same age range, but they stay longer, tend to spend longer at school. And we found that feeding the basic needs of the child was their main concern, and they knew very, very little about educating their child, and had many misconceptions. They didn't know, for instance, songs to sing to their children. They didn't feel that doing anything besides cleaning or feeding was a really important activity or chore to be done. It was just their focus in general was to do just with the growing, just to say, of the baby. We looked at the population that we looked at. It was mostly an ethnographic study, not done by us, by the way, but by a specific firm that does these types of studies. We found that the opportunities for personal growth are very limited. If you look at this graphic here, you'll see that from 15 to 19-year-olds, male students are the ones that, males are the ones that are in school. If you look at the males that are at home, they're very little, they're less than 10%, whereas almost 90% are in school. And the women, 15 to 19-year-olds, over 30% or almost 30% are at home, and just around 70% are in school. And this changes as soon as you're, they should be in university from 20 to 24. And by then, almost 70%, 60-something% of women are at home already. And some of the males are still studying, whereas not so much the case with the females. And after 25 years old, they're mostly, the women are mostly at home. It's also important to say that Mexico ranks as the first country of unplanned pregnancies. Teen pregnancy is very widely produced, 2 billion births per year among the 10 to 19-year-olds. I mean, as young as 10-year-olds are having babies. This is a huge social problem that has been addressed from different angles, but still there. We haven't been able to get rid of it. So teen pregnancy is mostly, we realized, to the population we were going to be working with. 23% of teens start their sexual life when they are between 12 and 19. 33% of women did not use any protection on their first sexual relation. And we also find that 340,000 births a year are of moms under 19-year-olds. So it is a huge problem. we realized, talking in more in-depth interviews with these moms, that there were more or less two styles of motherhood. The more traditional one, mainly among the less educated women, only with ninth grade, lower secondary school, and they mostly made their decisions based on family traditions. They seek very little information on their own. They're not very current on any topics related to motherhood or parenting. And they were very easily influenced by surrounding and imposing nagging figures like their mothers-in-law, their grandmothers, and others. And they tended to perpetuate the status quo. That's how they saw themselves. The more current variety of moms did value medical opinion, were better educated, at least had finished high school. They seeked information from various sources and tried to check its veracity. They would make questions, they have questions and analyze information and making their own decisions. They would know lots of things about current issues relating to motherhood and parenting. They were much more lively around those issues. And they were less influenced by the environment and had their own opinions and were less preoccupied about what their mothers or grandmothers or mothers-in-law had to say. They would try out new solutions and they would seek to convert her peers. So mostly you would say that we would try to, in this program, focus on both types of mothers, but try to make them, the more traditional ones, less traditional and more current, but we try to do it in a way that they would feel easy about it and not to impose it on them. On the other hand, the fathers, they were also young, and they were regarded mainly as the providers. Many of the moms were working as well, but mostly they felt themselves, and the moms felt that the providers were the fathers. They take care of most household expenses, like they would cover the baby basic needs, their food, their diapers, their clothes. Parenting definitely reconfigures men. We've seen in this study, in this project, many want to be more involved in raising their children, but they're also very afraid or they don't know how to do it. And there is an important tension between providing, being the providers, and having a physical presence, being there to be able to participate in their child's upbringing. Here are two contrasting testimonies from fathers. The first says, "My child is everything to me. I devote every spare minute I have to him. Whenever I am not working, I am playing with him, and that is the best part of my day. I don't go out anymore. I do not see most of my friends because they are the same, staying at home and wanting to play with the babies." The other one says, "Fatherhood represents the fatigue of trying to be a good father. I live with my wife, and the truth is, it is difficult for me to help her looking after our daughter. The most difficult thing is to get home from work and still having to attend to her." So this was the background, very, very rapidly said, we had when we started devising this educational model, which I will tell you about very briefly. The educational model is based basically in these three materials. I'll say a bit about each of them. But what we wanted to do, and where the focus of the model, where the accent is put, is on improving the quality of interactions between adults and children. We realized with this pre-study before we started that they didn't have a clue, fathers and mothers that we were interviewing, about the importance of the interactions with their children. They were completely at a loss there. They were only thinking on making sure the children had their food and they were clean and they were healthy and they would grow to be bigger children, more. But they didn't feel they had anything to do with educating their children. They didn't see as teachers themselves. As it was interesting what we were hearing from Eddie before, because this idea of being the educators of their own children was not in the picture mostly. So we decided to make a model that was the most simple and easy to convey to all the people that was going to be involved. So we decided to divide it in 3 developmental spheres: the physical growth and the movement, which was the one that the parents were more aware of; the language and communication, which they were not very aware of, and the play, which was always seen as redundant or not important, and if you had the time, but not necessarily as a very basic and important part of child development. I will go through these ones very quickly. The physical growth movement in the developmental sphere, it had 4 developmental stages. We decided to organize the milestones, obviously letting them know that these milestones are just orientations. They do not have to be absolutes. I mean, we know that children developed at more or less these stages, but we decided to have 4, from 0 to 6 months, from 6 months to 1 year, the 2nd year of life, and the 3rd year of life. And we gave them general ideas of the kind of milestones in each of these 3 developmental spheres that they should arrive to. I won't go into the details. And the materials, particularly the guide, which is called Niños Sanos y Felices, Happy and Healthy Children, have key concepts which are explained in a very simple language for a large audience and not longer than 3 pages, and quite a lot of practical advice, well explained, easy to carry out. For instance, here for growth has to do with developing some exercises for the legs, or fortifying. Yeah, this is to fortify their legs, so to control their head, or to aiding children to learn how to crawl, and so on and so forth. They're very but the most important thing is that it is easy for the teachers, and I would say a bit about the teachers in a moment, but also for parents, to make them easy to digest all this information. Then it was language and communication, again, 4 developmental stages, and key concepts as well about how children communicate, and the fact that they do not speak yet does not mean that there is not a communication process going on, and explaining very, very simple terms, but the importance of understanding the crying of the child, which is the first way of communicating, singing to the child, talking with the child as much as possible, not just through the child, but directing the language specifically in this interaction with the baby, and play as the way of where the child interacts and understands the world around him or her, and the importance of playing since very young, and everybody participating in those games and those specific areas of place, and not just the concepts, but again, the practical advice. And from there, we went into specific interactions for learning. It was mostly based, I don't know whether I have the time to show you this short video, I can do it, on serve and return, which is the chunk of model for. Can you hear it?
I can see it, Elisa, but I can't hear it.
Okay, so I won't show it because I don't know what to do. Can you hear it now? No.
And adults return the serve.
Yes, now we can hear it.
Okay.
The key to forming strong brain architecture is what's known as serve and return interaction with adults. In this developmental game, new neural connections form in the brain as young children instinctively serve through babbling, facial expressions, and gestures. And adults return the serve, responding in a very directed, meaningful way. It starts very early in life, when a baby coos and the adult interacts and directs the baby's attention to a face or hand. This interaction forms the foundation of brain architecture upon which all future development will be built. It helps create neural connections between all the different areas of the brain, building the emotional and cognitive skills children need in life. For example, here's how it works for literacy and language skills. When the baby sees an object, the adult says its name. This makes connections in the baby's brain between particular sounds and their corresponding objects. Later, adults show young children that those objects and sounds can also be represented by marks on a page. With continued support from adults, children then learn how to decipher writing and eventually to write themselves. Each stage builds on what came before. Ensuring that children have adult caregivers who consistently engage in serve and return interaction, beginning in infancy, builds a foundation in the brain for all the learning, behavior, and health that follow.
Okay, well, as I said, we based the model on such interactions, and we're very, very keen on educators, teachers that work with us, understanding the model, understanding that we have to be aware when a child serves, like points to somewhere or starts crying or give us a cue, that we should return. And then we should name whatever it is that we're working with, and we have to understand the importance of taking turns and waiting, as well as ending each interaction and practice its ending and then again beginnings. And we do stress that having quite a few of these interactions a day, it is important. It's not that we're going to be interacting in such a way 24 hours a day with a baby or anything of that sort, but that we should use spaces that we normally interact with children, like when we're changing a diaper or when we're queuing up in the market to pay for the tomatoes we've just bought and so on, to use those moments as opportunities for learning. And we do this 5 curricular areas. We try them to have enough information they can use, first in all things to do with hygiene and feeding, as well as social emotional learning. There's just one complete book on SEL that has to do with the social emotional learning of the adults and how adults then use that with their children. The possibilities of exploring and investigating the environment, reading and communication, and all forms of telling stories and talking with the children, and from the very, very early days, as well as one last one, which is also very important, of artistic and aesthetic experience. Well, that said very quickly is the areas we cover with the educational model. The implementation, I would say, that has all the research that we know had policy interventions, and we knew that the early we started, the better it is. So we decided to focus on the first year of life. We wanted to have a balanced approach, therefore a balanced curriculum where the emotional, the social, the cognitive, the language were all taken into account. Also, supportive relationships and positive learning experiences, not to have bad feedback to parents, but to make it, as Eddie was just saying, as joyful, as enjoyable as possible, and to model all sorts of behaviors so that parents and caregivers could use that information to then use it on their own. And then as well, to detect all sorts of toxic stress and violence in the home so that we could do prevention with early referral using other areas of government to attend to those. It's basically organized through 4 months with 15 group sessions and 4 house visits. Here you have the names, the titles of each session. I'm not going to go into all the details, but you can have a feeling of the type of content that we cover. We do it through some worksheets. They're very well established of what is that they have to do. They have a brief introduction with key concepts. There are some activities for the adult to do with their child. There are also links to additional materials. There are videos, there are songs, and there's always a quiz at the end of the activity. It is in this we have an app which every parent can follow the activity within the app. So the quiz, it could be filled at the end, and then we have data from everybody to know whether they've understood and what has happened with the activity. There are also WhatsApp groups that the teachers form and coordinate, and they organize fora in those WhatsApps to be able to answer questions from parents, both individually and in group. So this is a first group session. They're receiving here these backpacks as well as their materials. And then the parents send their feedback to the WhatsApp groups of the sort of activities they are doing. And they both write messages as well as sending these pictures. You could see here, it doesn't matter the sound, but the video of a teacher walking towards the house. This is the modeling of the activity. She's throwing the ball and hoping that the child would throw it back, and showing the mother how to play with her child. And then this interview, she's asking whether the parent also, the father also plays with Lucia, with this baby. So just to give it a bit of flavor of what the house visit looks like. And since I have to finish very, very quickly, I'll show you the materials and the training. Training is I would single it out as the most important element that guarantees the quality of the program. It is split in 2, in intensive and regular training. Intensive is 30 hours before the teachers, which are mostly preschool teachers that have been trained to work with infants. And the first 30 hours, they learn core concepts. We make sure they have read the materials and they've learn how to work with the parents and so on. And then we have a regular intervention and training with them, which is made up of 50 hours throughout the term of the 4 months, just before they're going to introduce each topic. So it is at a par with the week's curriculum. We had some remote training, so that we had very quickly to work through the pandemic in order to make everything available to teachers. And the materials, this is Educar Niños Sanos y Felices is the material I just referred with the educational model. And then it's the emotions of my baby is called this one, which is the SEL. Some of the sessions are deal with this content, which is given in the app with small PDFs for they have the physical books, but they also have the specific parts of the book in each session through the app. And I'll tell you a bit more about this one in a minute. There are 2 more books coming. There's one on reading, which has 12 stories for parents to read with their children, and another one, a 5th one, is in the oven. It's all about activities for older children, older than 1 year, because there are so many sisters and brothers around, and they're always asking about more of this, but for older children. So we're developing now the model, extending the model to older children. And there are also 20 cartoon videos that are directly related to the material that can be seen through the apps. I'm not going to show those because I have no time, but this one, which is called Vente Cuento, it's a book to invite parents to tell stories, to learn to look at illustrations, to awaken the imagination of children, to provoke inspiration for the stories, and so that they enjoy and listen. 60% of parents like the materials and reported frequent usage, particularly of this book. They say in this particular quote, because it allows me to interact with my children and favor their education. They've actually, there's scarcely any books in the homes of the families we're working with, so this has proved to be an interesting material. So it has an introduction that invites parents to challenge themselves into making up stories and sharing them with the family, telling them specifically to the child. So this is only 3 pages to tell them how to invent a story, how a story is made up, what are the characters, who's the narrator, where the story takes place, how to start the story, and so on. So you have 12 spreads with very beautiful and colorful illustrations that have 4 beginnings to inspire parents to tell the story. We teach them to use this, or they could actually invent their own story and take, for instance, the pilgrims and invent the story themselves. That we do this in the sessions, and we try to make them to be as joyful as and enjoyable as possible, so that they would take that to the sessions with their own children. So these are this. And we have many pictures coming through the WhatsApp groups of them looking at this book. That's why we decided to make a second one. And just to finish with a few results, we've worked with over 2,350 very disadvantaged families. We've been working with over 25,000, but 10% of them are very disadvantaged. 1,500 trained teachers already. We have a high retention rate, even through the pandemic, of 90% of parents. The app is working very well. We have the 3 books, 20 animated infographics or cartoon videos, and many other links, additional material that they can get through the app. We're now working also with 50 place centers in the state of Mexico, and we became the first online ECE program in Mexico through the pandemic. So we've provided this service already to 25,000 families. 98% of the participants recommend the program. 94% are satisfied with the program's activities and with the teacher supports. 90% of the teachers report feeling very pleased with the training scheme and curriculum. 92% of families are satisfied with the educational materials and content shared in the sessions. And only so far, 57% of fathers have reported actively participating in group and individual sessions. 43% are still an important target for us. And by the end of the program, after the 4 months, participants shown that they have increased the frequency on at least one of the following activities. We've seen, and they report in the different ways that we talk to them, and we have information about what they're doing, that they do establish a daily care routine for the baby. They identify baby types of crying and therefore baby needs. They attend to babies crying with, for instance, lullabies. Most of the mothers that we've interviewed beforehand didn't know any song at all. They've learned all these songs that were also prepared especially for the program, and they sing them all the time. They can identify when the baby is stressed. They started to verbalize their emotions, and when talking to the baby verbally, they describe activities or routine the baby is performing, so they're much more aware of who is their child and what they do. They implement the servant and return interaction during the daily routine. This we've also been able to see. We're a long way to go, but at least I think we've started to see a change in the way these parents are educating and are relating to their children. Some external evaluation. The IDB, Inter-American Development Bank, has shown interest in implementing this educational model, and they're going to be carrying an experimental evaluation this year. Well, there are others like Catherine Snow that adopted this program as part of her course in Harvard, in at HAXI, where their students use it as one of the programs they research in Kath's course. So that's how I got to be here, and I thank you very much for your invitation. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elisa. This is really a wonderful program that you have presented. I think everyone is very excited about this. And actually, we had intended to break up into small groups, but I think looking at the time and at the questions that your program evokes, it will be more fruitful to have some question and answer until the end of this session. Could I start with one question about the parents that participate in the program? Because as I look at the written material that you provide, the advice and the app and what have you, it seems to me to require a pretty high level of literacy. Do parents apply for the program, or are there ways to overcome this in the case of parents with low levels of literacy? Can you explain something about that?
Yes, thank you for the question. We approach parents through hospitals. So when moms are just about to give birth, they are invited to join. That's how we get to enroll parents. So they have to fill a form, they have to be part of the program. There's a lot of social media that has been also promoting the program. So they might have heard about it in posters or in the radio or in social media about the program. It was launched by the governor. It was sort of, there was quite some a lot of commotions around the program. So that's how they learned about it, and so they were keen to participate. Most parents, as I said before, at least have covered their secondary schooling. At least they and that's that. I mean, that's the average of those parents. The enrollment of parents takes from very, very low income families, at least about the second or third percentile of low income. We do not take the one and not so many of the second percentile, because these are families which sometimes did not even have homes. So they're in a really bad state, but these are mostly very low income families nevertheless, and they've covered, they're more or less young, as I said, and they have finished certainly primary and mostly secondary school in many cases. Some of them have at least 1 or 2 years of high school.
Thank
so
you.
they can read.
Yes, they can read. So the literacy is.
They are very proficient with the app. They all have phones, and they use their phones with all sorts of apps.
Yeah. Great. Absolutely. Okay, there's a question from Susanna, and she says, which were the main implementations challenges, the good decisions, the challenges?
Well, for me,
can you tell us something about that?
To decide which 15 topics to cover. I mean, from the aspects I was in charge of, I had to decide 15 sessions with the parents, and that was hard, because that meant that we were not necessarily covering everything that it's in the guidebook, and I would have liked to have, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 sessions about language, and I could only have 1 or 2, for instance. I mean, I could go into the implementation was difficult because it started during the pandemic. So we had 1 or 2 physical in-person sessions before we had to go into Zoom and WhatsApp, but it was very, very interesting that we didn't have a lot of losses there. Over 90% stayed on. They were interested. They wanted to do things with their children. So I guess that would be my answer.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I saw people trying to put up their hands. Are there still hands to be put up with questions? Is there a monitoring or coaching after the program is ended? This is a question from Maria Judith.
No, not no. Once the program ends, it ends, and we go to the next batch of parents. Because when I said that we needed to make it inexpensive, it was that the state could actually give at least 15 sessions and 4 visits to every parent. So we would like to make, to make this last longer. For me, that would be the great challenge, to be able not to have it for 4 months, but for the full 3 years, and have the visitors. We would achieve so much more, but that would make it so much more expensive and less scalable. So
do you think you might
has to think about that.
Might a university be interested in following up on your program? Because if you don't follow up with a program, it would still be interesting to find out to what extent parents manage to continue their practices.
I mean, to have win-win alliances with others that would like to follow up. Yes, I guess that's why also Kath was interested in doing some research into the program, into Bebés Más Fuertes, because I mean, we know, for instance, about the fathers, some of the figures and some of the information I gave you is because one of Kath's students focused on fathers. We wanted fathers to be involved, but since we had that research done by one of Kath's students, now we know much more, and we should be doing more in the future, specifically for fathers, in order to make sure that they get much more involved.
But still, 57% was not so bad, given the fact that only 1% applied.
Yeah, I mean, they did not apply as the way we do it is we register the baby.
Okay.
And once the baby is registered, the information could benefit more than one person, and usually it is the mother who enrolls and who's there and so on. But she's asked to share this information with other adults around the children, around the baby, and that is mostly the father, but it could be the grandmother, older siblings, and so on.
Thank you. Malva, you have put up your hand.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Elisa, for this wonderful program. I think it has some points with Chile Crece Contigo.
Yeah, of course, I should have mentioned, there's a lot of information that we use from other programs, and certainly Chile is an inspiration, a very important inspiration. Jamaica as well. There are other programs that we use as inspiration, of course.
Thank you. But my question was, how do you know that parents have changed their practices? You said they show an improvement in the frequency.
Well, they basically
how do you know?
There are many sources, maybe not enough, but we have quizzes at the end of each session that they have to fill up, and they have to tell us what they're doing. There's also surveys at the end of the program, and also in the home visits. As I was showing you, the teacher that goes into the house, she takes notes about what the parents, particularly the mother, are telling her, as well as all the pictures that she received. So from all that, the last slide that I gave you of the sorts of things that we're seeing happening come from those sources.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Malva, and thank you, Elisa, and thank you, Eddie. I think this is a very good moment to conclude our session. The time is almost up, and for many of you, the day has only just started, so there is a lot of work waiting for you, I'm sure. I would like to thank all of you for participating. Once again, I urge you to look in your email box for messages from ProLEER for next year's round of talks and panels. And Eddie, once again, thank you very much for joining us. We really loved your presentation and your insights into the research findings on parental involvement and the questions that you asked. And thank you, Elisa, for this wonderful program you shared with us. I'm sure that everyone is waiting for this program to be disseminated across Latin America. I understood from your presentation that the materials are free to be
the materials are not free.
They're not.
No, the materials you can buy online the 3 books, and now the next 2 books you could buy, because there is a commercial side of the books that they're being sold online. Online as and physical books, so you can have them as ebooks or as but there's a lot of information on the website that it's at the beginning of Childhood First. You have a lot of information, and there's also my email that Case can share with you if you want any extra information.
We will make sure, Elisa, we will make sure that your PowerPoint presentation and your contact information will be distributed among everyone who participated today and across the network. So thank you very much for sharing. Thank you, everyone, and look forward to seeing you again next year. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.